Hey, grade 11s, welcome back for lesson 2 on the heart. Today we're going to cover some basics of the heart, the structures, and next we'll be talking about something called the cardiac cycle. So today we'll be learning about the pulmonary and systemic circuits, so kind of tying in what we learned about last day about the pulmonary arteries and veins. We're going to be talking about the structure of the heart, including the chambers of the heart, the valves of the heart, and the muscle structure, because your heart is actually a muscle. We're going to talk about the major arteries and veins. The ones I'm concerned about are really close to your heart, not too many to remember there. And then we're going to talk about coronary arteries and how our heart muscle receives oxygenated blood. So the pulmonary and systemic circulation, our human circulation system has two circuits. The pulmonary circuit, which is a circulation of blood between the heart and lungs. If you look over at this image here, these blue dots depict blood cells moving throughout the body. So you can see here they're traveling back to the heart, where they are going to be moved out to the lungs for gas exchange to occur. And then they're going to be transferred back to the heart, where they'll be pumped out to the body. And that circuit that includes the movement of blood between the heart and the rest of the body is called your systemic circuit. So let's talk a little more about the pulmonary circuit. Okay, so in this image depicted here, we can see that the pulmonary circuit moves blood between the heart and lungs, where gas exchange takes place in the lungs. The vessels of the pulmonary circuit are the pulmonary arteries. This one here is depicted by this big blue vessel. It's going to travel to the pulmonary capillaries, where gas exchange is going to occur in the lungs. And then this oxygenated blood is going to travel back to the heart through the pulmonary veins here. If you recall from the respiratory unit, alveoli is where air enters the body. They make it to your alveoli. And it's the structure of the capillaries. They're very small. Their diameter is 1 cell thick. And as you can recall, your alveoli are also 1 cell thick. So diffusion of gases exchange of gases can occur quite easily through these structures. One thing I want to point out, this diagram to your right here, it's kind of funny looking. You may not have seen it before, but it's just a simplification of these two different systems and how they react. Your circulation system is not just this one big track here and this one track here. It just kind of really illustrates the differences between the pulmonary circulation and the systemic circulation. Here's a diagram of what your body actually looks like. So your pulmonary circulation is going to be located in your chest here, or your thoracic cavity, and your systemic circulation is going to be the circulation that occurs between the rest of your body and the heart. So let's talk a little bit about the systemic circuit. The systemic circuit moves blood between the heart and the body tissues, where gas exchange takes place in the tissues of the body. All other arteries, veins, and capillaries, aside from the pulmonary arteries, veins, and capillaries, are included in the systemic circuit. Coronary arteries, which supply blood to the heart muscle, are also included in the systemic circuit. So let's talk about the heart. Heart is a muscular hollow organ located in your chest or thoracic cavity. Your heart is roughly the size of your fist, and it's going to pump deoxygenated blood to your lungs, where gas exchange will occur. The blood will drop off that carbon dioxide and pick up some fresh oxygen. And then that fresh oxygenated blood will be pumped out to the rest of your body. A couple of fun facts about your heart. It beats roughly 150,000 times each day, almost 5,000 times per hour. And the average resting heart rate ranges between 60 to 100 beats per minute. Maybe in phys ed class, you've measured your resting heart rate and various target heart rates as you're exercising. Some athletes have a resting heart rate as low as 40 beats per minute. So professional athletes are very, very in shape. Their hearts are very healthy. So when their hearts beat, they beat very efficiently. So they're able to pump a lot of blood with a lot of oxygen out to their body efficiently. So it doesn't need to pump as much when they're resting. Your blood is going to pump between 6,000 to 700 pardon me, 7,500 liters of blood every day. That's a grown adult. That's enough to fill 20 kiddie pools. Tried doing the math to see how many Olympic swimming pools it filled, and unfortunately it didn't fill one. So I thought, hey, maybe a kiddie pool might be a little more familiar. Another thing to note is that the heart operates independently from the brain. So your heartbeat is controlled by electrical impulses. Your brain doesn't tell your heart to beat. It has this electric system that keeps the pumping of the heart going. So let's touch a little bit on the structure of the heart. The heart is composed of cardiac muscle. Cardiac muscle is unique to the heart. You won't find it in any other structures of your body. As you can see this little diagram here, we've got skeletal muscle. So if you flex your bicep, that muscle in your arm is called skeletal muscle. It's striated, so it's got these little ridges in it here, and that gives it the ability to kind of contract and create force. Smooth muscle is found in your intestines, and then this cardiac muscle, I wouldn't call it a hybrid of the two, but it certainly has traits of skeletal muscle. The only thing is, cardiac muscle is involuntary. It's not something you just think about. I'd like my heart to beat a little bit quicker. It just happens because it's controlled by external factors there. So the cardiac muscle performs coordinated actions to maintain blood flow. And another part about the heart structure to note, it's divided by this muscular wall called the septum. So let's talk about the chambers of the heart. So the right side of the heart is going to receive deoxygenated blood from the body, and it's going to pump it to the lungs. Left is occurring over here in this blue part. One thing to note, you'll see this in diagrams, I'm sure throughout your studies, but this blue color is going to depict a deoxygenated zone. As you saw in a couple slides earlier, the pulmonary artery is depicted as this blue color. Your blood is never blue. It's just something that kind of shows viewers that blue is deoxygenated blood. Deoxygenated blood is actually a very dark red color. So this blue color here is just depicting that this is an oxygen poor zone. Your left side of the heart is going to receive oxygenated blood from the lungs, and it's going to pump it to the rest of the body. Your upper chambers here are called atria, or atrium, singular. And they're smaller than the lower chambers. The right atrium is going to receive deoxygenated blood from the body, and the left atrium is going to receive oxygenated blood from the lungs. Your lower chambers here are called ventricles. They're muscular, and as they pump blood away from the heart. So they do more work than your atrium do. The atrium kind of just, they don't just sit there, they receive blood, whereas your ventricles are going to push the blood out. Your left ventricle is going to push blood to your lungs, to your pulmonary artery, and your left ventricle is going to push blood to your major artery here, the aorta. As mentioned here, the right ventricle pumps deoxygenated blood into the lungs, and your left ventricle pumps oxygenated blood to the body. You might be thinking, Miss Nicola, I know left from right. Why is this mixed up? But one thing you want to keep in mind is we look at diagrams of the human body, it's something that's called ventral view. So you're viewing this heart from the front. You can almost picture a little happy face up here, and this is somebody's heart as you're facing them. So that's why our left and our right are opposite. I've never seen a diagram where left is on the proper side. So these diagrams are in ventral view. Just keep that in mind. Same text on the right here as the last slide. I've just got a more detailed diagram in here. If at any point you need to view this PowerPoint, it should be available on Teams so you can view the diagrams. If you want to view any of the GIF images or the moving images, I recommend that you view it in not in presenter mode, but to actually view the slideshow, or also get a still image. So let's do a quick run through here. We've got blood entering the heart, this deoxygenated blood entering the heart. It's going to make its first stop in the right atrium. It'll pass through this valve here into the right ventricle, where it'll be pushed up into the pulmonary artery. It's going to go out to the lungs, and gas exchange is going to occur with the pulmonary capillaries in the alveoli. And then oxygen-rich blood is going to make its way back into the heart through the pulmonary veins. This blood's going to be deposited into the left atrium. It's going to pass through this valve here into the left ventricle, where it's going to be pushed up from the left ventricle through this valve here to the aorta, where it's going to go to the rest of the body. Okay, so let's talk about valves. The heart is equipped with 4 valves to prevent backflow. It's important that blood doesn't get caught up in the heart because that would cause inefficiencies. The heart wants to be as efficient as possible. It's working so hard. So when blood passes through a valve, it's intent that it passes through and it stays on the other side, passes through, stays on the other side, passes through, stays on the other side, etc. So we've got the valves divided into 2 different categories. First, we have our atrioventricular valves, or AV valves, and these are going to regulate the blood flow between your atria and your ventricles. So you've got your tricuspid valve over here, and it's going to control the blood flow from your right atrium to your right ventricle. Your bicuspid valve, or mitral valve, either term is fine. I prefer bicuspid because I find it easier to remember. And this is going to regulate blood flow from your left atrium to your left ventricle here. Your semilunar valves are going to regulate flow from blood, regulate flow of blood from your ventricles to your major vessels. So these are going to monitor blood that's exiting the heart. The pulmonary valve is going to control blood flowing from the right ventricle into the pulmonary arteries. And your aortic valve, which is this tiny valve right here. I don't think it's actually small, I just think it's the image here. And that's blood flowing from the left ventricle to the aorta and out of the heart. Okay, we're just gonna visit the structure one more time here. The heart is enclosed in this protective double-walled membrane called a pericardium. And the function of a pericardium is to protect the heart from infections and physical impact. In between the membrane here is something called pericardium fluid, and it's going to reduce friction acting on the heart muscle. As you saw in the last slide, our heart is kind of moving vigorously, so this is just going to kind of ease any damage that friction could cause. And then our heart is composed of 3 layers. We have our epicardium, which is the outermost layer. It's got these protective tissues here, and it's going to produce this pericardial fluid that lies right here. In the middle, we have our myocardium, middle layer, composed of cardiac muscle. Another name for cardiac muscle is actually myocardium. And then we've got this thin inner layer here called the endocardium. It's 1 cell thick. Let's talk about some major arteries and veins. There are 5 that I want you to note and take note of. 2 major veins that drain blood from the body into the right atrium. That's this chamber up here. We have our superior vena cava and our inferior vena cava. Superior meaning upper and inferior meaning lower. So blood from your head and your arms are going to enter the heart through your superior vena cava. Here, this diagram should say superior, but we can remember upper. It's going to drain into the right atrium here. And then blood from your major organs and your lower body are going to enter the heart through your inferior vena cava. There's 1 major artery that's going to transport blood from the heart to the body, and this one's called the aorta. So the aorta comes out, and it's going to actually loop down to your lower body, but it's got these 3 little outlets here going up to the upper body. We don't want to forget about the vessels we talked about yesterday. The pulmonary arteries and veins are notable vessels as well. So just keeping these 5 in mind, the superior vena cava, the inferior vena cava, the aorta, we've got our pulmonary arteries and veins as well. Ending off the lesson, we have the coronary arteries. So coronary arteries supply the heart with oxygenated blood. There's 2 major coronary arteries. We have our left coronary artery, which is, surprise, going to supply blood to the left side of the heart. And then we've got our right coronary artery, which is going to supply blood to the right side of the heart. These arteries branch directly off from the aorta. So we've got that very oxygen-rich supply exiting the heart, and it's going straight back to feed oxygen to this heart muscle. These arteries are going to branch into smaller and smaller vessels that are going to lead to capillary beds in the heart tissue, kind of similar to capillary beds that would be anywhere else in your body. And gas exchange will occur in the tissues there. And you've got a system of coronary veins that are going to carry that deoxygenated blood away from the heart tissue. And that's going to drain directly into your right atrium here. So it's a pretty close or pretty small circuit, if you will. Blood's coming straight from the aorta, going to the heart tissue, being picked up by the coronary veins, and being dropped or deposited right into the right atrium there. Disease of the coronary arteries can lead to damage to heart tissue. Most heart disease is caused by damage to these arteries. It could be blockages. But if we're not getting our heart that nice, rich supply of oxygen, the tissue begins to become damaged and it could eventually die. And if our hearts aren't functioning to the best of their ability, we're going to see major decrease in function in the rest of our body, because without our heart, we don't have oxygen going anywhere. So what do I want to take away from this lesson? A couple things I'd like you to know. What are the differences between the pulmonary and systemic circulation systems? Just kind of knowing what organs they essentially service, which organs are involved. What is cardiac muscle? So how is it different from skeletal muscle? Well, it's involuntary. It kind of has that going for it, whereas skeletal muscle is something you kind of consciously think about using. How does blood travel from the tissues through the pulmonary circuit and then back to tissues? This is a question that I love to ask in a course like Biology 30S. Just kind of picturing yourself as a red blood cell and talking about your journey through. I want you to talk about what chambers you'll pass through, what valves you'll pass by, where do you become oxygenated, where do you lose your oxygen and gain carbon dioxide. So just kind of getting down to that microscopic level and describing that pathway is a really good way to show that you understand how the system works. How are AV or atrioventricular valves different from the semilunar valves? So just knowing that the AV valves are going to be the valves that separate the atrium from the ventricles, and that our semilunar valves are going to prevent backflow into the ventricles. They're going to prevent backflow and push blood out to the vessels. What functions does the pericardium serve? We want to remember that it reduces friction from heart movement. It also protects the heart from kind of a physical blow. If you were, gosh forbid, and in an accident or something kind of severe happened to your body, the pericardium is there to protect your heart, as well as prevent infection. What are the major vessels that transport blood to and from the heart? So that's going to be the 5 mentioned a few slides ago, just talking about the aorta, that major artery leaving your heart, the superior and inferior vena cava, those major veins that drain blood into the right atrium. And let's not forget about the pulmonary arteries and veins. Also, one thing I'd like you to know is, how does a heart muscle receive oxygen? So just talking about the function of the coronary arteries and that path of blood, the blood leaving the aorta, traveling through the coronary arteries into capillary beds, oxygen exchange occurring, and then traveling back to the right atrium through those coronary veins. Okay, and then I've got questions from your next assignment, just a quick knowledge check to make sure that we got some information from the slide or from the student notes. Question 1's asking you to label a diagram of the heart. In the assignment, should you choose to do your assignment web-based, there are text boxes, so just click on the box and then type in your answer there. I believe there's 12 labels, don't quote me on that. If you decide to, print the assignment, then you can handwrite your answers in. If you choose not to print and you choose not to do the web-based and you'd like to do yours on loose leaf, I've seen some assignments come in with loose leaf already. If you like to draw, I highly encourage that you take the opportunity to draw a heart. I have always found that when I take the time to label something and draw something, I just remember how it all kind of comes together a lot better. What structure lies next to the others. You may find that helpful there. Question number 2 is asking you to compare and contrast the pulmonary and systemic circuits. So just kind of saying, what are the similarities? What are the differences? Where is gas exchange occurring? That's kind of an important part I'd like you to know. Question 3, pretend you are a deoxygenated red blood cell entering the heart. Describe the path you would take through the heart and pulmonary system until leaving the heart oxygenated. So just talking about what valves you, or what vessel are you entering through, what chambers are you passing through, what valves are you passing by. Going down to the microscopic level and pretending you're a blood cell. Good way to understand how the system works. I'd like you to describe how the heart tissue receives oxygen. So talking about coronary arteries and where do coronary arteries stem from. It's the aorta, and they're going to go into the capillary beds of the heart tissue, drain up through coronary veins into the right atrium. Similar to last assignment, I'd like you to do some research on 2 disorders of the heart. There are links provided in the assignment should you wish to choose those. If you wish to choose other resources, I'm a-okay with that. We're going to learn a little bit about angina and myocardial infarction. Another term for myocardial infarction is heart attack. Angina and heart attacks are kind of similar, but they do have their differences. So I'd like you to kind of compare and contrast these 2 conditions. So that concludes today's lesson. Thank you so much for your attention. As always, if you have any questions, you can drop me a line on email or you can comment on Teams.